I'm Marcia Fraser. I'm the Special Collections Librarian here, at least for another month and a half. I'm retiring the end of June and looking forward to that, but I've loved my time here. I do want to let you know if for those who haven't been here before, the restrooms entrances are out on the hallway just right outside here if you need them. And I would also like for you to silence your cell phones if you would, please. And I do have feedback forms here. These are pretty innocuous, very simple, but they're important to us because it helps us build our programs. So if you would take a minute after the program and fill those out, we would appreciate it so much. Well, it's always a joy to have Bradley Boshers join us. Bradley is the director of the Williamson County Archives and Museum in Franklin. He holds a Master of Arts in Public History from Middle Tennessee State University, and he has an emphasis in archives and museum management. A Bachelor of Arts in History from Abilene Christian University. He's a member of the Academy of Certified Archivists and currently serves as secretary for the Society of Tennessee Archivists. Bradley's work experience includes Rutherford County Archives and Metro Nashville Archives. And this will really surprise you. His areas of interest are genealogy, local history, records management, and museum curation. Is anybody surprised? It's my great pleasure to have Bradley with us today. Thank you, Bradley.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Marcia. Thank you to Special Collections for hosting me this morning here at the Williamson County Public Library. I'm excited to get to talk to you guys about preservation and specifically about preserving your family records this morning. As I go through the presentation today, I'm going to talk about a couple things. So first, I'm going to spend a few minutes doing an introduction to Williamson County Archives and Museum, where I'm the director. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we do and what we preserve as a department of county government. Then we are going to move into talking about risks, so specifically preservation risks. So some of the things you need to be aware of as you make an effort to take care of your family files, family photographs, other types of records. Then we're going to look at some of the supplies I've got with me today that will help us to preserve those records as well. And we will have some time at the end for questions if you've got something specific to follow up with here at the end of the presentation. So Williamson County Archives is the official repository for Williamson County government records. So the core of the records that we keep and preserve are administrative records from or created from the function of county government. We have things that date all the way back to 1800, immediately after the founding of the county, that run up through the present. So some of these types of records include things like marriage certificates, wills, tax books, other types of administrative records that are generated over the normal function of county government. So we take those records, we keep them, we preserve them. A number of the things that we have in our collection are marked for permanent retention. So that means under state law, we are obligated to keep them. So they not only have the historical value for us, but there's an administrative requirement for us to keep those and make them available. And then as the Archives Department, we also manage the county museum. So in the county museum, we collect and interpret objects with a specific connection to Williamson County history. So we have some things related to just people from Williamson County communities, Williamson County industries. And we maintain that permanent collection. We preserve those objects in the museum and put them on display. The museum's been in place now about 15 years. We've benefited a lot from the generosity of this community, from folks like yourselves who have brought objects in to donate. So our collection is completely donation driven. So the things that you see on display are coming from folks that live across this county. Jumping back to the actual county records, so we have a number of resources that we make available. A lot of what we work with are paper files like you see here, so things you would traditionally think of with an archival collection. You may have seen in other archives or a place you've done research, boxes like you see there on your right. So pretty traditional archival practice working with those, working with record books and photographs as well. We make these types of materials available through the Archives Reading Room. So that's where we are set up to accommodate folks coming in, whether it's genealogical research, historical research, maybe some kind of professional practice research that's going on. We've got a number of things available. We've got a reference book collection available in the reading room. We've got a number of digitized records that we have scanned, so old records that we've gone back and scanned to make them available on demand, so you can sit down and view them at a workstation. We've got a number of records on microfilm as well that you can sit down and view in the reading room. And we do have permanent full-time staff available in the reading room as well to provide reference service. So no matter what your comfort or skill level, if you've done your entire family tree, if you're trying to get started the first time, we've got resources and staff there that can help you with that process. So like I mentioned, in addition to the paper kind of administrative records that we collect, we do collect some other items of historical interest, so including photographs. We've got a couple of nice examples here from the Fred Williams collection that we received a couple years ago. So it's actually A&C Williams there on the left and his wife Melissa, and his descendant Fred Williams there on the right. You guys see him in the paper a couple years ago. They named a street here in Franklin, A&C Williams Way, over by the Sonic here in town. And then we also have the Franklin Rodeos coming up, so I wanted to include one from that parade. So I think that's on Saturday. So you can see a nice shot down Main Street. Really neat that we can collect and preserve some of those items in our collection. We've actually been working hard behind the scenes to continue to scan and add and catalog these as well. So if you do check out our website, we're I think almost at 4,000 photographs that we've been working out on. So not only scanning them and making them searchable, but improving the metadata to describe them so that folks can find different photographs they're looking for. And then we also have been working over the past 6 months or so to bring online our newest asset, which is the Williamson County Record Center. So this is a new dedicated record storage building that includes our archival collection. So it's about a 20,000 square foot facility that, like I said, is dedicated only to managing and storing Williamson County records. So it's a nice centralized, climate-controlled facility where we've got a number of things, like you can see there on your right, the large shelving units. We've got a bunch of these cubic foot record boxes you can see filled in there, top to bottom. And it's all nice, high-density compact shelving where it's got the sliding shelves that go back and forth. So it really has improved our capacity and capability to preserve records for this county and make things available that way. We've got a bunch of, you can see the bound books there. So these are all tax books. You can see these big old volumes. The picture doesn't quite do it justice, but if you can kind of imagine with the thickness on some of those, they're just chock full of the old tax rolls that we need to go through. And then we do have dedicated lab space there that you can see as well. So when something comes in, we can clean it, do some of the preservation work that we'll talk about later, go through it, examine it for pests, any kind of other threat before it goes into the stacks with the rest of these materials, so we can make sure that we're not introducing something harmful into that storage area at the record center. So we've got our information there. You've got it on your handout as well. Like I said, we'll pause at the end to take any additional questions. But we are open Monday through Friday, regular hours 8 to 4:30. And then we are open about half the year. So right now, spring through the fall, on Saturdays as well, 9 to 5:30 there at 611 West Main Street in Franklin. So just down the street at 5 Points. Like I mentioned, we've got the County Museum open during regular hours. We have the reading room open during regular hours for reference services. So if there's anything at all we can help you with, please don't hesitate to stop by. So now I'm going to move into talking a little bit about preservation and specifically preservation risks. So when we're talking about preserving our family records or preserving county records, really what we're trying to do is, so we're trying to take care of them, but we're trying to mitigate risks. So we're trying to eliminate or minimize some of these threats to, the physical safety, the integrity of these records. So there's a number of things we want to account for. So I've highlighted there changes in temperature and humidity. So we're going to come back to that one here in a minute. It's maybe one of the slowest acting, but I call it sometimes a silent killer that can come back and harm your records. We'll talk here first about water, mold, and pests. So a couple examples you can see here, probably something you've seen before. Both of these are from my personal photograph collection, so things that we have dealt with. You can see here this nice little mouse nest that is custom made in this box of paper files. So when we talk about pests, we're not just talking about bugs, we're talking about little mammals as well. Anything that can get into your records, get into your stuff, chew it up, cause any kind of harm like that. On the right, you can see just water leaking from the ceiling. Again, something that happens, leaky roof, leak from an AC unit, anything like that can and does happen. So when we're thinking about preservation, when we're thinking about, what can we do to minimize or eliminate those risks? So where in the building is there water flowing? Where in the building do we have a pest problem? Do we have a pest control regime in place? Do we spray, et cetera? So there's a number of different things to keep in mind whenever we're planning and working on preserving our family or county records. One thing I will note, especially with the water, I don't know what it is. Well, I guess we have a hard time sometimes finding space in general. So all of us, so whether it's finding space for the county or finding space at home, and it seems like so many times, your family records, genealogical records, or even historical records just always want to find their way to some kind of water threat. So that's one I will re-emphasize. It's pretty common to see stuff tucked into a basement under some pipes or tucked by an outdoor window, things like that. We need to try and avoid as much as possible. Now, I did include our little cicada friend there. No specific threat to records that I'm aware of, but just another type of bug out there that could get into your stuff. So looking at the other column here, there's a couple additional kind of threats, a little more serious that we want to be aware of. So one there at the top, mishandling, I do want to take a minute to talk about. When we talk about mishandling from the archive side, what I mean is just being intentional about when and how you use your records when you pull them out to do something with them. For example, in the museum field, we kind of have a rule of thumb that anytime we're moving an object, we're going to go to the destination first and start there and make sure we've got a space cleared. Then we're going to work our way back through the pathway that we're going to take to the object before we touch anything. We're making sure that we have a plan in place. And the same thing kind of goes with your paper records. So if you're pulling something out to work with it or use it, double check the kitchen table for condensation. Is there water on it? Think twice. Maybe I can set my coffee to the side, for a few minutes while I've got something out. Maybe think about when you have files stored, if you've got some more modern active records that you use a lot, maybe keep those in a separate space from your historical records so you're not thumbing through them frequently, and causing wear and tear that way unnecessarily. So just little things to think about to be intentional whenever you pull something out. Second one there, theft, is probably not as important for your family records, but just something to keep in mind. I've heard one or two stories, probably not someone that's going to break in to steal, your family letters, but sometimes family dispute stuff happens. People think I should have had Aunt Joanne's letters, or Uncle Joe left me this. So just something to think about when you're storing stuff. Again, being intentional, being a little thoughtful about where it goes. With fire, obviously, serious one on the list, so something that you're aware of for your personal safety, for your home safety. But just something to think of, again, with where we're storing records and how we're storing them, what's around the box that I'm leaving in the house. I do have some products for, so like fire boxes or fire safes that are fire resistant. So I do have one of those myself. Now keep in mind those are only provide temporary protection. So it's not gonna save your stuff if there's a total disaster. But if there's a small fire, something that only has a partial damage to the home, I think those can protect your stuff for about 30 minutes or so, heat resistance for about that long. So just an option to keep in mind that's available. And then I will emphasize here acidity, which kind of stands out from some of the other stuff on the list here. But really just from personal experience, I've seen that many a time where some of these other kind of bigger, more dramatic mitigation efforts were made, to protect from those more serious items. but then you had a bunch of family letters that were left in a box with some really low quality newspaper. And over a number of years, it has just been eating away at itself and tearing everything up in the box. So that's one thing I would look at, like I note there. I would really try, if you do want to keep newspaper clippings, try and keep them separate from some of your other material. Those newspapers just have such high acid content. Over the long term, they can really damage anything else that you store with them. We'll look at some acid-free products that can help mitigate that as well. So taking a look here, like I mentioned, jumping back to kind of climate and humidity, temperature change. One of the things I've seen personally is, again, some of these other more serious threats were mitigated, but family records were stored just in a non-climate controlled state, or, in a shed, in an attic, in a garage, like we'll look at in a second. And over the long term, short term, it's not going to be a big deal, so it's nothing to worry about taking immediate action on. But over the long term, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, when we get these long fluctuations of temperature, and you can see the precipitation changes as well there, some information from ETSU highlighting some different cities around the state. You can see those wide swings, so from 80 degrees down to 30, up to 90, down to 0. Over the long term, that will kind of, freeze and bake, and as I like to call them, it'll fry your records. They'll get really dried out, they get really brittle. I've had multiple times where something will come in. They've got a nice box of stuff, but it's been sitting in a barn for 40 years, and you can barely even pick it up because it's in such a deteriorated state. And it can be difficult to bring those back to life. So what I strongly recommend, if there's any way you can, is to avoid doing the classic attic or garage storage. So I know for most folks that's going to be a best option space-wise, having some room in the attic, having some room in the garage. But again, in my experience, so many of those risk factors we just looked at can be mitigated just by storing stuff in the house. So if there's some way that you can find some space in a closet, even just a shelf, a little corner, somewhere where you can store a box of stuff, maybe even under the bed, if you've got a furniture piece with some extra storage that's inside, a bottom cupboard, something like that. Look for those little spaces around your home where you can secure something, where it'll be inside, it'll be in the more climate-controlled environment of your home or apartment. It'll be mostly protected from pests. It will probably be away from water sources. And it'll be just as protected as anything else in your home from any kind of theft, anything like that. One additional area I want to touch on as well. So we could really do a whole presentation on just digital preservation alone, but I do want to touch on this briefly. So as much as you want to be intentional with your paper files or photographs, any family records like that, you also want to be intentional with your digital files. So I bet everyone in here has a digital photograph that's meaningful to them, and I bet some of us only have that saved on a social media platform. So think about what you can do. There's a number of products available. There's some things that are relatively low cost that you could use just to make sure that you save your digital photographs or digital files in more than one place. And especially if you can find some way to have it in, so not just two places, but like two separate locations. So like if I have two thumb drives of records saved, that's better than having them on one, right? Because then if one drive fails, I have a backup. But if I put both those drives just in a drawer at home, if something happens to that drawer, then they're both gone. So think about, it can take some creativity, but ways you can back stuff up. So if you do save it on a social media platform, maybe keep a physical hard drive at home, maybe use some other type of backup software where you can store it online digitally in some kind of cloud service. Maybe you have a safe deposit box even where you could leave a small USB drive with family photographs, something like that. So think through those options. That's coming up more and more, and a lot of people are kind of taking for granted that how they have their stuff stored now, it's just going to be there because it's digital. But a lot of the same risk factors that we talked about apply, plus all the risk for digital file formats changing, data being corrupted, all these things that can happen over time, as much as acidity or fluctuations in temperature and humidity can have an impact. So like I mentioned there at the bottom, so this is probably the most challenging task out of everything we'll talk about. But some other food for thought as well is looking at options to potentially migrate old file formats you have forward. So this can be quite challenging for archives. Archives all across the U.S. are dealing with this, but I bet some of us here have old VHS tapes or have old family films on cassette tape and don't have a VCR to play them, or even we're quickly moving past DVDs as well. So you might have information stored on a DVD, family photographs, videos, etc. And you may not have a DVD player at home or even computers now, less and less disk drives. So all that's rapidly changing. It's a challenge to keep up with, but something just again to think about, as part of mitigation, to think about how I'm recording this, how I'm saving it, and thinking through what your options might be to try and keep that in the family going forward. But it is challenging. So with all that being said, I don't want us to get too hung up on some of those specific risks, because you're never going to be able to mitigate every single thing perfectly, right? There's always going to be a chance of something happening. But what I want to emphasize this morning is just to be intentional about how you preserve your family records. Like I mentioned, some of the examples I've seen, so often, people will have this stuff that it's truly priceless. I know it can be hard getting multiple family members to buy in. You folks are here because I'm sure you're historically minded. Other members of your family may not be the same way. So it can be a challenge to get that kind of buy-in to make an intentional effort to keep them. But really just being thoughtful about what you're doing is going to go a long way. So like I mentioned, setting aside specific space in your home or apartment, thinking about where it's placed, just being intentional with that act instead of just being like, well, we got a box of old stuff, we're just going to throw it in the attic and maybe we'll remember it's there, maybe not, or let's just shove this in the garage next to the oil and the paint, That's what happens most of the time, and that's what can cause the most harm to folks' records, just that kind of, lack of intentionality about how they're stored and kept and preserved. So now we are going to talk about some of these supplies, and I am going to pass these around if you guys can snake them as best you can kind of through the group here. So some of the essentials that I'll highlight first are our acid-free, archival approved boxes. So these are safe for the long term. They're not going to damage anything that you have. This particular model of boxes are really nice because they're durable. They protect stuff on the exterior. They hold together really well, so the bottom's not going to bust out. Like I mentioned earlier, this is the kind of the foundational box size that we use at the Record Center for kind of consistent storage. So again, these cubic foot record boxes. So take a look at these. We've got the smaller size as well, so it's kind of the same principles in play with these Hollinger boxes. So about half the size of the box, large box that's being passed around. Again, these are what you'll see more often in archives. Nice label on the front. They've got the reinforced edges. Again, protective exterior, acid-free. Really nice once you have a set of records. Organized, clean process. Line them all up in there. Very easy to go through. With the boxes, the second most important tool that we use are these acid-free folders. So, really, if nothing else, between these two, you can do a lot of good with the stuff that you're preserving just with these boxes and folders. So I'll pass just a few of these around. So you can kind of feel as these go by, you can feel that they have a little bit of like a buffering quality to them and a little bit of reinforcement as well over just like your average office folder. So these are great for the older, especially 1800s paper records that we work with. Keep everything nice and secure and protected. No acid passing through. Your paper records can sit in that for a long time and be just fine. A few other things in the same vein, just kind of different products with those same properties. So we do use folders as well, like the acid-free, or folders, envelopes like the acid-free folders. So same qualities. I like these especially if you've got a bunch of loose stuff. So say you have old newspaper clippings, old recipes, kind of small format size things. You can secure them all in an envelope together, just write right on it what's in there. You can do a whole list of items and have it all nice and secure in that as well. We also use a few different size boxes, specifically for photographs. So we like to use these to match up, so like a 4x6 or 5x7 photo, so that it's nice and snug in this box as opposed to one that might be a little too big for it, so there's not a whole lot of room for them to move around or get damaged. And then we do use photo sleeves as well that match up, again, with the photo size. So again, these sleeves, same qualities as the folders that are going around. And then we do have some inert plastic ones as well. So these are archival safe plastic sleeves. Also a good option that's pretty affordable, just to give some layer of protection. You know, if you've got a bunch of photos in a box, keep them from sticking together, again, with that humidity change, etc. You can have a nice little layer of protection in there for those specifically. And just a few smaller things that we use here. This is really more just archival service, just so you guys can kind of get a look at them. So we do use these sponges for cleaning records, especially stuff from around the turn of the century. It does have coal ash on it from coal burning, coal fire stoves. So these are really good. So we'll take the full soot sponge and cut it up into cubes like you can see here, and just use that for real gentle kind of feathering cleaning, just to get dirt and debris off of our paper records, so that when they go into those nice folders, they'll be as clean as we can get them. And then just another small little tool that we use, so this little micro spatula that we will often use to get metal out of any paper records. So a little bit more relevant for like the administrative side of things, but if you happen to have some stuff, you know, in the family with some rusty staples, they use some old kind of rusty pins to stick stuff together. We can go back with that little tool and kind of ease that metal out of there, you know, kind of wipe the rust down as best we can with the sponge, you know, and call it good. You won't be able to kind of undo any little bit of rust damage that's on there, but you can kind of keep it from spreading going forward. So I will add with those materials that you all are taking a look at, one thing I will emphasize as well is taking a look at your family photo albums. So that's one area that's becoming more and more important, and something that's relatable to probably just about all of us in here. So they do make archival safe, archival approved photo albums. You will have to work a little bit to identify the right products. So I pulled just like an example of one here. You can see at the bottom where it says, you know, archival, acid-free, and photo safe. There is a specific kind of like certification that you can look for, this PAT, photographic activity test. So there is real life testing done with some of the materials that are in the photo album itself. So they will take those materials and test them against photographs and other types of chemicals, etc., to see what the reaction is, to make sure that a photograph will be safe, you know, in this specific archival plastic sleeve, you know, in this archival safe binding. So that's one pretty attainable project, and pretty affordable type of product that you can get. If you do have some photo albums that have a lot of family photos, something that's important to you, I would look at possibly migrating those sooner rather than later. I was at a house recently and taking a look at some of my buddy's family photos there, and you can see the regular plastic sleeves are already starting to corrode, like they're getting a little bit crunchy, they're drying out, they're wanting to stick to those photos. So getting some plastic sleeves, they're kind of the material we just passed around, that plastine, that's individual photo sleeve, kind of that same material, but for the pages, you know, where you can slot your photographs in, and have the safe binding as well. So something to look for. And then I will mention too, as far as preservation, one of the small things that sometimes makes it easier to preserve stuff is when you know who it is or who it's from. So I do encourage you, it may seem counterintuitive from a preservation perspective, but don't hesitate to write on the back of those photographs. I've looked at stuff that's 100 plus years old with names written on the back. it's not going to hurt it. It's going to be way more valuable to have the names of the folks in that photograph as opposed to the small amount of harm that might come from writing on the back of it. And at the same time, if you don't want to write on the photo itself, if you do use a good quality sleeve, you can write on a sheet of paper, slot that in the sleeve behind the photograph, listing the individuals, left to right, something like that, who are in the photograph. And then one other point there too, kind of jumping back to the digital preservation question. One thing I do recommend, if you have some photographs that are special to you, don't rely on them just being on a social media platform. Don't just rely on saving them on a hard drive or on a SD card from your camera. I would encourage you to go ahead and spend a little bit of money to print those out, so you have that hard copy to keep, something that you can pass down in the family. Like I mentioned, I think that's becoming increasingly important. And I think a lot of people are only keeping digital stuff in one place and keeping a lot of digital stuff in one place where it's very vulnerable to getting lost or destroyed. And like I said, I know all of us in here have photos that are special to us that are digital only. So definitely look at that as an option, getting some things printed out to keep. Kind of lastly here, I just listed a few of the vendors that are out there where you can purchase some of these supplies. So I would encourage you to try and pick things up from a reputable site as opposed to some other types of online marketplaces, just because the whole point of using this material is that it's archival safe. So I'd encourage you just to use a well-known brand or vendor so that you can feel comfortable that the stuff you're getting actually is archival safe as described. But with that being said, I do want to reemphasize, like I mentioned previously, the number one thing you can do to preserve your family records is to be intentional. So as nice as these materials are, some of these products that we can use, I don't want you to feel like you got to run out and spend any money to work on preserving your stuff in a better state. Really applying some of those principles and ideas we talked about with how and where things are stored is the number one thing to do. Once you get to a good point with how and where your stuff is stored, then that may be the next step to look at some of the products or materials that you can use to better preserve or store them for the long term. And with all that being said, my last piece of advice today, that again may seem counterintuitive, is to use the records that you have. So one of the biggest things, or one of the challenges I hear, like I mentioned, is there may be one, maybe two historically minded members of the family that will keep stuff and pass it down, and they want this to be known. But it's hard to get by, and we've probably all experienced that. It's hard to get other members of the family on the same page. So one way that you can do that is to use the records that you preserve. So if you've got things that letters from a deceased family member, you've got photographs of folks that you have members of the family may have never met, bring those out and use them. It's okay to, like you said, we're intentional, if we're thoughtful about how we're handling them. Bring them out at family events, post stuff online, make those digital copies to share and use. Send stuff to family members, because the more people that know about it, the more people that know what's available, the greater chance there is that you can get that buy-in where it'll mean as much to somebody else as it does to you to keep and preserve in the family. So that is all I have today. I'll be happy to take any questions.
What do you write on your photographs with? A pencil? A pen?
Pencil would be fine. There is like an acid-free archival ink that is available. So any kind of art store will have pens that are archival safe. But I would recommend a pencil. They do make specialty pencils as well. I don't know exactly what that entails. Yeah, with like a little too waxy on the back or something. Yeah, I've seen that as well. So they do make a archival ink that you could use and just press lightly on there to write on them. Good question.
When you print out your photographs, what kind of paper do you use for printing that out?
It's a good question. I would just use any kind of like higher quality actual print photo as opposed to I would go through like an actual like studio type place where that's what they do is print, photographs as opposed to like a quick service place. But as far as the type of paper, Yeah, I would look at going through a service. And they should have material that's high enough quality where it'll last for a long time. Did you have a question, sir?
Yeah, it was really about printing photographs. Are you saying that for archival purposes, you want a professional to handle that? Or is there, are there inks and papers we can use at home with our own printers, for example?
Yeah, good question. I don't know of anything to use at home that would be to the quality level that I'm thinking of when I'm talking about it that way. But at the same time, printing a copy at home, still a fine way to use it. There's nothing wrong with that. From my perspective, it's really just looking at kind of bridging this gap from when everyone had rolls of film, with the negatives, getting them developed and having that to preserve. So often having the photograph and the negative, et cetera, to just having, digital copies saved on a social media platform. Just so having some type of physical copy that you can preserve.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I've had a challenge finding a place that can actually do high quality photographic scanning and printing. I've been to a couple of places in Nashville, and it seems like it's a dying art, like nobody actually does it anymore, not here in America. I'm from Johannesburg, South Africa. There are maybe 1 or 2 places that still do it there, relatively at an affordable rate on archival paper or stuff like that. I don't know, do you know of it, Nate? Because I agree with you, like, the only place I could find was like Walgreens. I mean, I took my family photos on a memory stick. I mean, they look terrible. It's not.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. That your experience mirrors what I've heard from folks as well. I don't have a specific place to refer you to, unfortunately, as far as that goes. But I do agree. I think it's increasingly difficult to find that service since things have moved digitally so quickly. So I don't have a good answer for that one.
I have a question that you said, that point that you raised earlier. I took all my old VHS tapes and I have them put onto CDs, yes, or DVDs. Yes, now the computers don't have that, so you get the external thing that you plug in. But soon that, you won't, like already my neighbor has an Apple computer and I have what is it, I don't know, American ones. HPC, no, what is it? PC. Dell, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a Dell, so like I can't even use that thing. And then we have a printer scanner at home, and the quality that it scans the photos, it's like I just want to cry.
Yeah.
So basically, my parents in South Africa, they have Canon proper high quality scanner at home for this purpose. Maybe that's not too expensive. Would a library or the archives have a scanner like that the public can pay to use?
We do. So that's one thing. So you've nailed multiple problems very articulately. But one thing we can provide. So I know at the archives and in special collection there are very capable scanners you can use. So you can scan like in.
Scan slides as well. This is the best newest thing.
Yes. So please take advantage of that if that's useful to you. Come to either of our sites and we can work with you on that. One note I will make, when we scan to preserve something or to use it for printing in the museum, we will scan at 600 DPI. So that's a number to keep in mind for like a preservation level digital copy. It's not the total requirement, but it's something, if you have that capability, I would go for that to at least have one copy at that DPI. It will be a larger file, but that's something that you can do a lot with. And then you can always have like a smaller, like a 300 DPI JPEG version as well if you want to have like a use copy for something else. But yes, so the scanning side, we have options available locally to get that done. But like you mentioned, from the printing side or from migrating media forward, it is a big challenge. One of the things we face, we all face, but especially like on the administrative side, is just not even just the changing media, but the changing file formats. So like people have things that are saved on Microsoft Word 1993, and then you've got to try and open that in Microsoft, 2019, something like that. There's all kinds of problems that can occur. PDF file formats, same thing. So it's a big challenge. Yeah.
It's going so fast. Nobody can keep up.
Yeah, definitely. Get Deborah, and then we'll come back to you.
One thing too is on scanners that you buy, they will scan things at different levels of size.
Mm-hmm.
And a better scanner will make it a smaller file sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, and that has to do with the manufacturer and the program that they're using to do the saving of the technique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I
Good
will
point.
add just something interesting in. I also still own 8-inch disc from when I worked at the
Yeah.
library.
Wow.
Now, so I've gone from an 8-inch.
You talking about those floppies?
No.
Oh my goodness, that's
Floppy.
true. Floppy. I don't know
Floppy.
this.
A floppy that's 8 inch, so I've gone through all of the
Yeah.
medias, and it is very difficult,
Very
to
difficult.
be able to keep up with the
Mhm.
technology now.
Yeah,
But the
Absolutely.
scanners and the programs have a lot to do with that file size,
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you.
including the PDFs.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
I have an old tintype photo.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a place that we could get restored, or how could I get that copied
Mm.
into a better quality current photo?
Good question. I would say some people will disagree with me on this, but when we have tintype, something like that, I will go ahead and make a good quality scan and just run it over the scanner. Try to just do it one time and get the good quality copy. But I would feel okay with that. To me, it's worth the slight risk of exposing it to the scan light to get a usable copy. Because then once you have that, I would take that tintype and just wrap it up and put it away basically, so nothing else happens to it.
What are your sleeves?
Depending on if you've got a loose one, something like that, a sleeve would be okay. With those, I'm just always worried about just any kind of friction on the front of it. So I will use just like an acid-free tissue paper to go around at one time, and then maybe put it in something after that. Yeah, those are very sensitive, but I would feel okay go ahead and getting a scan. And then you can use that, to print off of or to, post, do anything with it, so you can actually use it, and keep the tintype itself stored safely.
Okay, so that's the segue to my second question. Where can we obtain these Gaylord archives and the ones that you posted, like the Hollinger and the University Pod?
Yeah. So those different vendors all have like an online store. So that's what I would recommend, just browsing the catalogs there just to see what's available. There's other options as well. I just put those up there as some well-known brands that you can trust. The stuff that you're getting is as they describe in terms of quality and safety. So I would just check out their catalogs and just get an idea of what's out there. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes.
I had a question on the archive records.
Mhm.
I've used the online index and found some wonderful records in there.
Mhm.
Early 19th century in Williamson County. Are you still digitizing, or is everything digitized that you have?
Great question. So it is still a work in progress. So I'm proud to say it should be 99% of the loose paper files we have from the 1800s are scanned and viewable in the reading room. And those should be ones that you can find on the online index as well. We are in progress with the early 1900s, only into about the 19-teens with those. There's still a swath of things, from those teens, leading up to the present that we do not have scanned. But those 1800s records, all the loose files we have, just about should be available to view digitally and to get a digital copy as well. Any other questions? Yeah. All right. I think if there's no other questions, that's it for me.
Wearing fabric, like an old wedding dress or something.
Good question. Couple different options to take. With textile, nothing too specific. One of the hardest things is just trying to avoid like folding it up and creasing it, because those creases are where it's going to deteriorate the most and potentially come apart. So for example, in the museum where we have a number of quilts, we will roll those up kind of like a Tootsie Roll with archival safe material. So we specifically for those, we will use kind of like a cardboard tube. We'll roll the fabric up around the tube so there's no creases. Then we'll just wrap it with like an acid-free kind of tissue paper and like loosely tie it up so it can still breathe, but it'll be physically covered and not creased. Something like a dress or a jacket, We will put those on a hanger so it can hang loose. Again, try and not seal it. We don't put plastic on it, but we'll use that same kind of tissue paper and just do like a simple shroud, dust cover on it, and just let it hang like that. There are archival hangers. I mean, most, like a wood hanger would be fine. Something like that would be pretty safe. They do have like a archival safe plastic hangers that have kind of more like a suit jacket hanger where it's got a little body to it to kind of hold the shoulders. So something like that. Yes.
I have a family Bible, one of the big ones. At what point do you say we need like to get a Bible restoration involved?
Good question. Don't have a good answer for you. It'll be kind of case by case. The challenge with something like that, it's just going to be one, finding someone who can do the work. So finding a conservator. So there are specialists out there that will be able to work with different kinds of materials to say fix the binding or to glue back in pages in a way that's safe for the overall book or for the Bible in this case. But it's going to be hard to find someone, and it's not going to be cheap to do that service.
I know it's not cheap.
Yeah. But I would look for, so that's what I would say. I would look for, if you're at that point, I would look for a specific conservator. Like say you do have pages are falling out, we want to be sure we keep these in, or the binding is completely coming apart, we've got to intervene to do something. I would just look for a professional that can do that specifically to put that back together. And then we do have, like for a few of the family Bibles we have in our collection, they do make kind of clamshell boxes that will fit something like that. So that's one way, kind of an immediate intervention. If it's falling apart, it's hard to fit it in something. It might be worth, trying to find like a clamshell box that'll fit those specific dimensions, because those Bibles can be pretty thick. So it wouldn't fit like a traditional box.
Oh, so I have a basket. It's about 300 years old from Indonesia.
Wow.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about it. But I was wondering what would you preserve something like that? It was made of long-term leaves of palm. And it's in a perfect condition, but it was in a sealed glass cabinet in my grandmother's house.
Oh, wow.
Over 100 years
Yeah.
or longer.
Yeah.
So now it's here with me in Tennessee, and the humidity and all those things, like you say, is different. And it's just in my dressing room. I need to do something for it.
No, that's a hard one. I don't know specifically with that. Like you mentioned, probably the humidity would be like the number one thing I would kind of worry about. If it's a lot drier here, or if it's a lot more humid here, it could mess with the plant fiber that's in the basket itself. But I would say, if you've had it here, I would just keep an eye on it. It may do okay, just breathing naturally as long as it's inside where it's not too sharp of a change over time.
Yeah,
That might be okay, just as is.
I think that I agree with you, because there is not that big difference here between day and night temperature. I had bought some art. There was wooden art and wooden frames and paintings on canvas in Europe, and I took it to Johannesburg. After not a long time, the wooden frames had buckled and the art had cracked. And I took it to a specialist in Johannesburg he was trained in Czechoslovakia to restore art in Prague. And he told me that in South Africa, because we don't have climate control, because it never gets that cold or that hot.
Right.
But in the winter, we have extreme difference between day and night temperature. And that makes these objects crack. And that was like really frightening. And since they've been here now for 4 years, they're fine. So I think actually climate control here really helps, and that not have that extreme temperature difference. I saw you showed it there over a year. I think what you were showing.
Right.
But in South Africa, that happens in one day.
Wow.
Here, be very, very hot in the day, and then minus temperature in the middle of the night.
Yeah, that'll definitely take its toll. Again, it seems like something that wouldn't have as much of an impact as it does, but those fluctuations will cause a big impact over time.
So I think everything is better here.
All right, I think that's it. If there's no more questions, that'll do it for me today. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate your attendance this morning.